Lloyd, just so you know, every time I listen to your show and you go from a segment to a break and the music kicks in, in my head, I picture me and you driving down the road doing Beavis and Butthead.
It's funny because I think the same thing. I think of you two as Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah, that's right.
Pistols, prayer, and potluck. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi folks, welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 276. Thank you so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week this week. Thank you for all of you who have continued to listen and support the show. We really do appreciate it, and welcome to all of you who are new and just have stumbled across the show. Hope you enjoy what you hear here today, and I hope you'll come back for and check out our almost 6 years of previous episodes. We've got lots of content. I've been at it for a while now. Today is our variety show week. For those of you who are new, that means you're going to hear not just my voice, but you'll be hearing from Mia Anstein and Pastor John Bennett. Sergeant Bill Sylvia, unable to be with us this week. He had a busy week, so we'll get back together with Bill in episode 278. Before I begin, though, and get the show on the road, I do want to thank everyone who made this possible, the awesome men and women who are members of the Reformation Gun Club. Armed Lutheran Radio is listener funded, and that means we don't have any sponsors, we don't have any advertisers. We rely on the generosity, the kindness, the support of the Reformation Gun Club members, people who put their money where their mouth is, value what we do here, and want to see it continue. Today, I want to give a shout out to Derek from Huntsville, Alabama, to Drew from Excelsior Springs, Missouri, Gordon, James, our seminarian from Fort Wayne, Indiana, Kurt from Rialto, California, Sue from Conover, North Carolina, and our newest members, Marianne from Watertown, New York, and welcome back to Anthony from Cottonwood Heights, Utah. Thank you all so much for your support, especially during this crazy Biden economy. We really do appreciate everything that you do. As I said, folks, Armed Lutheran Radio is listener funded. We have no advertisers. We have no sponsors. This is the only thing that you will hear today that's even related to, or you might even call an advertisement. We rely on our members to help keep things going here, and you can join them and take advantage of some really awesome benefits for as little as $1 a month. Come on, you've got $1 in your, probably in the console of your car or down in the cushions of your couch. For $1 a month, you get access to hundreds of hours of exclusive content. You get access to our cool new website, a weekly members-only podcast that comes out every Wednesday or Thursday, depending. It's usually on Thursday mornings. I put out a podcast specifically for members. You get invitations to our monthly online hangouts, one of which we just had a couple of weeks ago, which was a lot of fun. Gave away some prizes and hung out with some really cool people. To learn more and to take advantage of all these benefits, check out the website, armedlutheran.us/gun club, and I hope you will consider becoming a member and joining us. We'd love to have you. Look for a link in the show notes for this or any of our previous episodes. All right, before we get to the cast for their contributions this week, got a couple of things on my mind I wanted to share. First off, any of you watching the Olympics? No, me neither. I know the anti-American flag kneeling bunch is a small percentage of the overall total, so that's not what's keeping me from watching the Olympics. Honestly, I never really have cared about the Summer Olympics or Olympics in general. I mean, over the years, I've watched a little here and there. If it's on television, if somebody else is watching, I might sit down and watch for a minute or two. Aside from, I guess, the U.S. and Soviet Union men's ice hockey team and the Lake Placid games, I don't see the point. It's not something that really interests or excites me. To me, the games are just a massive waste of money, and they enrich the wealthy and leave kind of everyday people, usually in the poorest parts of the world, holding the bag. I don't think the Olympics have ever been financially, a gain for the countries that host them. Very rarely. I think maybe the Atlanta Olympics may have been the only one in recent memory that broke even. And to me, it's just sort of criminal that countries like Brazil are stuck, years later, still paying for massive infrastructure projects that are used for 2 weeks and then left to rot or torn down, like the venues in South Korea. What was it, 3 years ago, 2018? They built all these facilities, spent billions of dollars, and then 4 days after the Olympics were over, they demolished them all. Why? It's just stupid to me. The days of the amateur citizen athlete competing for the honor of representing their country is pretty much long gone, at least in the U.S. It's pretty much self-aggrandizement and sponsorship deals. Or in the case of the U.S. women's soccer team, it's about using the world stage to crap on the country that you supposedly represent. But there are some noteworthy stories that I did want to share. Vincent Hancock gave the United States a sweep in the skeet shooting competition. Became the first skeet shooter to win 3 gold medals. He hit the first 25 of his targets and closed out with 34 straight to win gold. And Vincent is from right down here, about an hour and a half away in Fort Worth. Very cool. Amber English won the women's event, defeating the reigning champion from Italy. She ranked 24th in the world, but ended up hitting 56 out of 60 targets, and won gold. So that's pretty awesome. But you probably would not know about this unless you went looking for it, or maybe you heard it here for the first time. The events are not televised, and there's very little coverage that doesn't also spend time talking about gun ownership in the United States and gun crime and that kind of stuff. The chief executive of USA Shooting, Matt Suggs, said in an interview recently that we need to work to make the sport more appealing on television. That's why those sports aren't televised. You mean more appealing than fencing or ballroom dancing or water polo or synchronized swimming or the dozens of other sports that nobody watches or even fewer compete in? Despite all the haranguing about equal pay for equal work, almost nobody watches women's soccer, except maybe for the World Cup and the Olympics. Ditto for women's basketball. Does that mean those sports are unimportant? No, but they're very lightly attended and very lightly watched. Millions of Americans, however, participate every week in skeet and trap shooting events around the country. And while the women's soccer team is kneeling for the flag and getting shut out by Sweden on national TV, the U.S. shooting team is proudly draping themselves in the flag and winning gold while nobody is watching. The problem for the shooting sports is not that they aren't television friendly. They're not politically correct. the media and the cultural elites who run the Olympic Games hate guns. At least they hate the ones owned by private citizens. They don't mind the ones in the hands of the army and police. It doesn't matter that so-called gun crime is not being committed with, $20,000 custom competition shotguns. Guns are bad, and we can't show them on TV, or people will get this crazy idea that owning them is okay, I guess. Another Olympic event, which apparently got everyone's tongues wagging this week, and you probably heard about it already because it's everywhere in the media. Olympic gymnast Simone Biles dropped out of the games entirely after a bad performance during the team competition. The universal reactions to this have been pretty bad on both sides. On the one hand, you have people praising her as for being courageous for dropping out. On the other side, you have people calling her a coward and a quitter. Now, as you know, I don't care a whole lot about professional athletes or celebrities. In general, I think they're horrible role models because they're just people like you and me, flawed people. And they just happen to have a talent that most other people don't have, whether it's acting or singing or just their unnatural good looks, or they have a skill, a physical skill. And that particular talent or that skill results in people throwing mountains of cash at them. And for some reason, having wads of cash makes people think that they're somehow special, or that their opinions or their life decisions are important or momentous, and they're not. Usually, their life decisions are pretty crap. And the worst of these people are the ones who actually believe their press, the people who think that they're important because of their fame or their wealth. They're not. So why am I talking about this? Why does this Simone Biles story matter? I think the responses to Simone Biles quitting show us just how people are today on both sides politically. During her part of the team competition, she was doing something. I looked this up. I've never heard of this before. I have no idea what this is. She was expected to try something called a Yushchenko 2.5. It sounds difficult. It's difficult to pronounce anyway. But instead, she ended up performing a Yushchenko 1.5, which is apparently one times less difficult, I guess. And she pulled that off pretty badly and almost fell. And it appears to those who know better than I do that she lost track of where she was in the air. I've always wondered how they do that, how you make those spins and tumbles and be head over heels literally and not lose track of the ground. That's an amazing skill. It takes a ton of practice to make that second nature. Thankfully, she was able to barely land on her feet. So, obviously, as we go forward here, I'm no expert when it comes to gymnastics. Just keep that in mind if you haven't figured that out already. So she pulled out of the competition. The rest of the team competition, initially she left open the option of competing in the individual events. And of course, everyone pounced on her for that decision. She later announced that she was withdrawing from the individual competitions as well. She was called a coward, a quitter, a disgrace to her nation. She was called selfish for quitting on the team. Biles cited the stress that she was under, being the team's brightest star, all the expectations from her teammates, from her country, from supporters, the media, sponsors. Some, including a columnist at Breitbart, suggested that it's It's just a game. It's not life or death or anything. She should just shake it off. It's not like it's a real injury. She was compared quite unfairly, might I add, to Carrie Strug, the teenage gymnast who in 1996 kind of, she stunned the world by performing a vault despite a leg injury, and she won gold. Some memes even suggested that Strug would be embarrassed by Biles' decision because Strug fought through her what would be later determined to be a career-ending injury. Should we somehow dismiss Simone Biles for her mental issues? Never mind that Biles, having lost track of her position in the air, again, something I don't understand how they do, she could very easily have landed on her head or her neck. But it's not life or death or anything. I mean, that's what I'm hearing people in social media saying. It's just a game. It's not like she could have been killed or anything. Did you know that male and female gymnasts suffer catastrophic head and spine injury at a higher rate than any other high school or college sport? Even football and ice hockey? Male gymnasts suffer catastrophic spinal injury at a rate 10 times higher than college football players. College female gymnasts suffer traumatic, catastrophic spinal injury at a rate 3 times higher than college football players do. The incidence of non-fatal, direct catastrophic spinal injury in gymnasts is higher than any other sport. In the case of men, it's 400% higher than the next closest group, 500% higher than ice hockey, and 1,000%. It's 10 times higher than college football. Yeah, she could have fallen on her head. But injuries are temporary, right? Glory is eternal. She should have sucked it up like Carrie Strug did. Never mind that Carrie Strug never competed again because she destroyed her leg and was forced to retire at the ripe old age of 18 because her coach pressured her to keep going when she complained that she couldn't feel her leg. Something tells me, I don't know this, but I would guess that Carrie Strug probably would like to have competed in another Olympics or two, like Simone Biles has. Many of the voices that are criticizing Biles are gun community folks, and that's astonishing to me because of how much we talk about mental health. Mental health for gun owners, trying to bring awareness to mental health issues. We talk about mental health when it comes to things like red flag laws and gun violence protection orders and that kind of thing. We talk about mental health for veterans and for first responders. But do we really mean it? Because it seems to me that unless you've been in combat, we just dismiss mental health issues. That's the message that I've gotten recently. We talk a lot about jumping to conclusions, not jumping to conclusions, for waiting for the facts to come out before passing judgment. Every time there's a mass shooting or a police shooting, the media and leftists and politicians, I know that was kind of an oxymoron, they jump to conclusions about the causes and the solutions before the blood's even dry. But here we are doing it again when it comes to Simone Biles. John Correa, who is the founder of Active Self-Protection, he has this rule. He calls it the 72-hour rule. He waits 72 hours at least after any major news story before he comments on it because, as we all know, initial reports are often wildly inaccurate and immediate speculation is therefore pointless. Maybe, just maybe, John's rule should apply to more than just shootings. In competitive shooting, we talk a lot about the mental game. Does the mental game only apply to the shooting sports? or does it apply to other athletic endeavors as well? Steve Anderson, the great one, on his podcast talks quite a bit in his podcast and his training classes and his books about the mental game, about repetition in training so that the actions that you take on the range become second nature. You don't think about clearing your holster. You just do it. You don't think about drawing your firearm. You just do it. You don't think about foot placement or presentation or the dozens of other physical actions that you perform in a match. You just do them. They just happen. And that's true of other sports as well. When you think too much about what you're doing or things that don't relate to the task at hand, it gets more difficult. Well, let me give you a personal example from my own experience. Early in my shooting career, so-called, I took major matches way too seriously. And the stress of that affected my performance. I spent money for travel and hotels and food and ammo and for match fees. And I prepared and practiced for the match, not very well, obviously, but still, I did. And I was expected better out of my performance. I mean, after all, if I just wanted to shoot paper targets and do it badly, I could do that a lot cheaper. I had no illusions about winning trophies or being the next best thing since Bob Vogel, but I didn't spend all that money and put in all that time to drive to a major match and stink it up. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who has ever felt that. I bet you have too. It was Sergeant Bill who pointed this out to me over a cold beer after day one of IDPA's national championship in 2016. All the stress that I was putting on myself was affecting my performance and taking the fun out of it. I almost rage quit in the middle of that match. And if it weren't for Sergeant Bill and our good friend Scott Longhorn, I would have packed up my crap about 5 stages in and driven away. If Simone Biles is worried about failure, as she's expressed, worried about disappointing teammates and sponsors and fans and all the stress that comes with that, all the things that actually don't have anything to do with vaulting, she couldn't have been focused on the task at hand. If she's worried about performing that Yurchenko 2 point whatever, then it's not going to happen. And that's how you lose track of yourself in midair. And unlike shooting, where you don't have to worry about where the ground is most of the time, that failure can lead to injury. Catastrophic injury, as I just mentioned. The difference between me quitting and Simone Biles quitting, aside from millions of dollars in sponsorships, was, of course, the team. IDPA is not a team sport. Simone Biles is a member of the team, and she quit in the middle of the competition. And for that, she's been called a national disgrace. Now, here's what she said afterwards. I'm not in the right headspace. I'm not going to lose this medal for this country and for these girls, referring to her teammates. They work too hard. It's not worth it, especially when you have 3 amazing athletes, her teammates, who can step up. Think about that. I'm not going to lose a medal for this country. Those who have called her a disgrace to her country need to think about that. Had she continued, and had she continued to fail, and had her failure cost the team a medal, what do you think the conversation would have been afterwards? How would her teammates have felt if she had selfishly pushed through and continued to make costly mistakes by failing to do Yurchenko 1.5s or whatever? How do you think the sports world and the mindless Twitterverse would have reacted to that? The first thing that came to mind when I heard that was Cam Newton. Now, some of you may know that I grew up in North Carolina, and I was a Carolina Panthers fan from opening day of their inaugural season in 1995 before I stopped watching NFL, of course, because of their political shenanigans, for many years was a Carolina Panthers fan, through thick and thin. Cam Newton was the greatest quarterback in team history. Rookie of the Year, MVP, took the team to a Super Bowl, most passing yards, passing touchdowns, rushing yards, rushing touchdowns by a quarterback. Amazing talent. But that talent came at a cost. He played through pain, as all of them do, but he played through more pain than he probably should have. He took a ton of punishment early in his career because of the way he played. For a quarterback, you don't want them running around looking for hits. Cam Newton hit people, and he took a lot of hits early in his career, and that took a toll on his body. And toward the end of that career, well, the end of his career in Carolina, he played when he shouldn't have. Nobody was willing to step up and tell the superstar that he needed to sit out and get healthy. And he was not willing, I'm going to guess or assume, either because of the encouragement of people around him or because of his own personality, he wasn't willing to step down as well. Instead, he continued to play with a shoulder that would eventually need surgery and a broken foot, and he continued to throw the most wildly inaccurate passes and throw interceptions at the worst possible times. And a team that went to the Super Bowl over a very short span sank to last place and missed the playoffs. He played through the pain, and it was hurting his team. Unlike Simone Biles, Cam Newton wouldn't recognize that. Biles walked away, and guess what? Her team won silver without her. Cam Newton fought through the pain, kept playing, shook it off, as people are saying, and his team sucked. And we on the right bemoan the fact that depression and mental health issues were worsened by the self-inflicted pain of the shutdowns that, government foisted on us during the pandemic. Suicides increased, depression deepened. Everyone talked about how the pandemic affected them mentally, and Simone Biles was no different. Apparently, she contemplated retirement during the pandemic, with training facilities closed and families on lockdown and travel restricted and the Olympics postponed. She got sick. She thought it was COVID. Turned out it wasn't. And she suffered from the same kind of depression that everyone else did. Is her depression any less important because she's a superstar? No, it's the same thing. We're all human. Should we be celebrating the fact that Simone Biles quit? No, absolutely not. I think that is the wrong take on this. It's certainly disappointing, but we shouldn't be patting her on the back for quitting. But at the same time, maybe we should have some measure of compassion or empathy for someone who's struggling. The dismissal of her mental state as something she should just shake off is disappointing to hear from people on the right, particularly gun people. And as someone who has close family members and friends who've struggled their entire adult lives with anxiety and depression, the suggestion that they should just get over it or put it behind them is infuriating, quite frankly. It's really amazing how quick we are as a nation to condemn, how unwilling we are to extend a little bit of grace to people who make decisions that we don't agree with and whose lives we don't understand. It's amazing how quick we are to dismiss mental health issues as though they're unimportant because they're not physical injuries, supposedly. So I would encourage you in the future, if you had a negative reaction to this story, take a minute and think about it. Maybe repent. What was gained by calling Simone Biles a coward, or a disgrace. Simone Biles' decision, it's not praiseworthy. It's not something we should be lauding as amazing and brave and courageous, because bravery is going on and facing your fears. But her decision is understandable. It's entirely human. So I would suggest that instead of calling her names, maybe we should pray for Simone Biles and for all young athletes who struggle with those pressures that you and I really can't understand. Yeah, they've got amazing skill. They have amazing talent. In some cases, they got amazing amounts of money. But that doesn't make them any less human. So, how about giving them a little bit of grace and save the vitriol for people like Megan Rapinoe and most of the women's soccer team who actually deserve it. All right, that is enough from me on this subject. I didn't think I would ever talk about the Olympics or gymnastics on the show, but hey, it's a first. 276 episodes in, and it's a first. Time to turn it over, well beyond time for me to shut up and turn it over to Mia and Pastor Bennett. Be sure to check back next week for Clinging to God and Guns with myself and Pastor John Bennett, and Sergeant Bill will be back with us in 2 weeks for episode 278. Have a great week, folks. I will talk to you again next time.
Time now for Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstein.
Hey, hi, hello. I hope you're all doing well. It is, can you believe it, another month. It is August now, and I just don't know where time is going. It's just flying by, and I don't know if it is for you as well, but I sure am just seeing the days zooming by 1 month to the next. It seems like we were just not long ago dealing with the pandemic, and we are well past halfway on that mark. I wanted to remind you that with August, it is National Shooting Sports Month. So it's time for you to gear up and get ready and get out and head to the range. The National Shooting Sports Foundation reminds us that we need to celebrate the shooting sports and our love for it during the whole month of August. Arrange range days yourself, or you can attend events at participating ranges and retail stores. And if you want to find those ranges, visit letsgoshooting.org and you can look up the ranges that are participating in that event. If your home range or gun club or maybe your favorite retailer is not listed when you go there, ask them to sign up. There is a link there where they can sign on and they can receive a promotional package. Those are available while supplies last. They can go take the +1 pledge, which I hope you have taken. And the +1 pledge encourages you to take someone else out and introduce them to the shooting sports or shooting in general. We like to share our knowledge and teach people to be safe, whether they own firearms or not. So I encourage you to take someone out and educate them and share the opportunity. Also remember that the National Shooting Sports Foundation, with the Shooting Sports Month, they have a giveaway. So go and check out the giveaways and you can enter for a chance to win some of their prizes and packages. All of that is going on during the month. If you are headed to the range, remember to share the experience. Hopefully you'll take pictures of lots of smiles. And when you share those on social media, use the hashtag Let's Go Shooting. So that's LetsGoShooting. Don't put that apostrophe in there because it messes up your hashtag in case you didn't know. But you can, as I said, you can enter to win, you can take the pledge, you can look for a host range, and you can also spread the word and encourage others to get out there. When you head to the range, we want everybody to be safe, we want everyone to have fun, and we want everyone to be welcome. So when you get out there, make sure that everyone is doing exactly those things, and make sure that you get involved and share the experience. While you are out there, remind the new shooters that shooting is one of the safest forms of recreation around. Ranges and firearms retailers across the country are staffed with skilled professionals and instructors who can explain the rules of gun safety and handling, as well as the basic skills that you need to become a top shot. Look for classes and clinics such as the NSSF's First Shot. Share those with the first-time gun owners that we saw in the last year. They definitely need to be taken under your wing. And I know a lot of you that are listening have experience. So I do speak about the new gun owners, but that's because I want you to recognize that they're out there, and hopefully you will share your time. Something else that I want to share with you is not just the Let's Go Shooting event, but I also want to let you know that it is the time of year where I am planning hunter education classes. Last year in Colorado, the in-person experience was eliminated, but with the pandemic, we saw a lot of people who didn't have food stores. They didn't have a pantry filled with food, and the grocery store shelves were empty. There were quite a few people who wanted to learn how to hunt. In Colorado, although we didn't have our in-person classes, they did online classes. And we had more than a 100% growth in the number of people that took hunter education last year in comparison to the 2019 number. So there are a lot of new hunters out there. If you have the opportunity to mentor a new hunter, I highly recommend it. Something that I have experienced in guiding new hunters and mentoring new hunters. It's almost like experiencing a first hunt over and over again. So consider that. Consider taking someone out there. If you are somebody who would like to learn how to hunt, I've mentioned it before, but make sure that you sign up for a hunter education class. And if you don't ever intend to hunt, you can still attend hunter education. In hunter education, we learn a lot about wildlife, habitat, conservation, and that is a successful model of wildlife management. The United States abides by the North American hunting model, and it is the most successful model for wildlife numbers in the world. I encourage you to check that out, and if you have questions, as always, please reach out to me. You can message me on social media, or you can email me. The email address is contact@miaanstein.com, or just give us a shout inside the Reformation Gun Club. I will talk to you next time. Bye, guys.
You can read more from Mia, watch her YouTube videos, or check out her podcast, Mac Outdoors with Mia and Leah, at miaanstein.com. It's time for Pastoral Pontifications with Pastor John Bennett.
This is the pistol-packing Padre, Pastor John Bennett, and I'd like to welcome you to another segment of Pastoral Pontifications. Today, we'll be talking about situational awareness, but perhaps in a slightly different way than you're used to hearing that term used. What brought this topic to mind was the observations I made while on vacation in Orlando. My family and I spent 10 days visiting various theme parks, but it seemed that no matter where we were, we'd see so many people with their eyes glued to their phone screens, paying no attention whatsoever to what was happening around them. We'd be walking along at a decent pace, all of a sudden finding ourselves having to slow down to the pace of your average nursing home resident because people were too busy staring at a screen to be mindful of their surroundings. It's important to pay attention to what's happening around us. Yes, we often hear that term situational awareness used, and so often it's used in discussions surrounding self-defense. We want to protect the things that are near and dear to us, our lives and the lives of our loved ones. It's a healthy habit to be cognizant of your surroundings and to mentally prepare yourself to respond to potential threats. But what about situational awareness when it comes to the changes we see happening in our culture, in particular when it comes to the influence that education has on our children? So often I come across people who think that education is just the same as it was when they went through the public education system. But it's not. Now, before I go any further, a brief disclaimer. It is not my intention to ruffle any feathers here, but this is a critically important issue because our children are the future generation. They will be the next generation of leaders in communities across our country. And it's important that parents who hold the values that we support and promote on this podcast to do everything they can to raise their children to be defenders of liberty. With that being said, on to my main point. Now, I was blessed to have attended parochial school for the entirety of my education, from kindergarten all the way through seminary. I received a quality education that was Christ-centered, yet even then, growing up in the Los Angeles area, things were beginning to change, at least in particular with regards to public education. In 1995, when I was a high school senior, it became mandatory in the Los Angeles School District for children as young as kindergarten to be introduced to the LGBT agenda, where curriculum including stories about children with two mommies or two daddies was taught and promoted in the classroom. This has evolved today into a strong push to promote transgenderism, to allow boys to use the girls' restroom and locker room facilities, to allow boys to compete in girls' sports, to punish those who won't keep silent and push back against the brainwashing of today's youth. There is now the nationwide push, backed by the teachers' unions, to have critical race theory taught in schools. A few weeks back, in fact, the NEA publicly pledged to fund the promotion of critical race theory to the tune of several $100,000. Now, in case anyone needs a refresher, CRT, critical race theory, it is a racist ideology which teaches that white people are, by virtue of their skin color, oppressors, that they have inherent bigotry, and have benefited from privileges afforded to them by virtue of the color of their skin. CRT also teaches that people of color, in particular those of African descent, have been oppressed and are disadvantaged and discriminated against within society by whites. It is truly an evil school of thought. It's promoted by hardcore Marxists for the purpose of stirring up racial division and hatred in our country, and now it's being promoted in schools across the country. I realize that this isn't necessarily true for every school district in the country. Thank God it's not. And some states have passed regulations banning critical race theory in public schools. If you have any school-age children and they're enrolled in a public school, it's important that you know what your kids are being taught in the classroom. The school has your child under their influence for 40 hours a week, 9 months out of the year. In truth, your children spend more of their waking moments with their teachers than they do with you. With this in mind, there's a few things you need to know. Yes, there are public schools out there that will provide a good education. The question to consider is whether or not the curriculum that is being used in those schools is designed to, in addition to educating your children, to indoctrinate them as well, and to indoctrinate them with a political ideology which is antithetical to liberty and, in most cases, antithetical to the Christian faith. California is the most populous state in the country, and most curriculum providers don't bother with making more than one version of their textbooks. So chances are the curriculum which is used in your local public school is written to coincide with the state of California's curriculum guidelines. Of course, this isn't universally true for every public school, but there's a good chance this is the case for your local school district. So the first point, know what's being taught to your child, know what's being taught in the classroom. Now the second point, which is this. With your child being in the classroom for 40 hours a week, you need to be on top of your game if you're going to refute the objectionable material that very well likely may be taught to your child. This means you're going to have to read through your child's textbooks. You're going to have to spend time talking with them about what they've learned in school on a particular day. And you're going to have to keep yourself informed, at least informed enough, to provide valid counter-arguments against whatever agenda is being thrust upon them in the classroom, assuming that's the case. It often is. The third point, know that you have options. Yes, I get it. The public schools are convenient. Busing's provided. It's covered at the expense of the taxpayers. But if you're not content to leave your child's education in the hands of people who might have the goal in mind of indoctrinating your child, then I encourage you to take a look at alternatives. Perhaps there's a charter school in your area that isn't under the auspices of the teachers' unions or under the auspices of the local public school district board of education. If there isn't a charter school in your area, maybe it's worth looking into joining together with other like-minded parents in your area and start one of your own. If there's a parochial school in your area, not only will your child be given a faith-based education, but in most cases, the quality of education far exceeds that offered by your local public schools. Now, this is just speaking from my own personal experience. I attended a Lutheran high school while my wife attended one of the top public schools in the San Fernando Valley. She will be the first one to tell you that I had a much better education than she did. Now, yes, it can be expensive, but think of this in terms of making an investment in your child's educational future, as well as making an investment in their faith. But perhaps there isn't a parochial school in your area, or the cost is far too high to be affordable. For some parochial schools, they can cost as much as $10,000 a year or more. This leaves you with one viable alternative: homeschooling. Now, I get it. For some of you, this may invoke images of horror. It may bring to mind the terrors of the COVID lockdowns. But with the advent of modern technology, homeschooling today isn't what it used to be. And there are affordable homeschool programs that don't require parents to even do the actual teaching. With these programs, the teacher gives a lesson via a virtual video classroom. Some programs include interactive lessons that are done live with the teacher. There are also homeschool co-ops where a portion of the instruction is provided in a traditional classroom setting and some provided within the home. If you're concerned about your child getting to participate in athletics or other extracurricular activities, in many cases, public schools allow homeschooled students living in the area to play on sports teams. If this is an option that you think might be a fit for you and your family, or if you're at the very least considering it, I recommend taking a look at Wittenberg Academy. Now, yes, there are other programs available out there, but I'm plugging this one in particular in this segment because it's the one that I'm familiar with. The program is supervised by people that I know and trust, and so this is the one that I would personally recommend taking a look at. This program is also based on a classical education model, so if that's something that appeals to you, it wouldn't hurt to take a look at their website to see what they have to offer, and that website is Wittenberg, Wittenberg, academy.org. As a closing thought, I want to clarify the purpose of the segment. While yes, I am a huge advocate for Lutheran education, I realize that it may not be a realistic solution for some of our listeners. Whatever you decide to do when it comes to your children, the most important thing, aside from the obvious of raising them to know Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, is to have situational awareness about what your children are being taught at school, and that you do everything you can to make sure your child is raised to be a bold defender of liberty and the Christian faith. That's all for today. If you have any questions or comments about this segment or previous segments, or if you'd like to request a topic for discussion on this segment, be sure to visit the feedback page at armedlutheran.us. Christ's blessings to you all and have a wonderful week.
John Bennett is the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. For more information, visit stjohnswillowcreek.org. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback or a review on iTunes and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.